I made multiple videos years ago saying that Square Enix made a huge mistake when it comes to the Nintendo Switch. One, they didn't do enough on the system, and it's negatively affecting them as their sales results were getting pretty pitiful and their games were not doing as well as they could. The potential of what they do at Square Enix was so much higher. I saw that. I think a lot of people saw that, but I was very vocal with that with my videos multiple times because Square Enix is one of my favorite video game companies of all time. I've been playing Square Enix games for pretty much my whole life, decades now at this point, and I knew that they could do better. And I do feel now that we know, confirmed from Square Enix's business when they did their little upheaval, which we'll talk about in a bit, when they ditched Sony and the exclusivity for Nintendo Switch 2 and multi-platform, it's working. It's paid off big time. And I was absolutely right about the Nintendo Switch 2 and Square Enix and the situation. So we're going to talk about everything that happened because there are huge ramifications from the results that we got from Square Enix to what you're going to actually be able to get on your Nintendo Switch 2 or on all the different platforms. Now, this isn't a they need to go exclusive with Switch 2 or there only needs to be that. This is not that type of video. What this is explaining when it comes to the sales results and when it comes to what happened and the games and what's going to happen in the future. It's going to be exciting, and I want to talk about that and a bit more. But before we continue, we are giving away a Nintendo Switch 2 at 140,000 subscribers or on September 1st, whichever comes first. Subscribe, like, comment. The winner will be chosen at random, and it's a worldwide giveaway. Thanks, peeps. So Square Enix had their financial quarter results, and here is what they talked about. The net sales, 492.3 million. That's up 32%. Operating income, 106.7 million. That's up 88.6%. Profit, 82.9 million. That's up 175.7 million. I just want to say real quick with profit, guess what system launched last year and the sales being tallied in to this point? Yeah, the Nintendo Switch 2. So huge link between profitability and a brand new system launch, and one of the publishers, Square Enix, being one of the most active and put out a high number of games on that platform. So there is a 100% link, and we're going to detail that more in just a bit here. Digital entertainment net sales, 313.3 million. That's up 51.8%. So what are the highlights according to Square Enix that caused this growth? Well, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth on the Nintendo Switch 2 and the Xbox. I also have to point out here that Rebirth and Remake were both multiple time top sellers on the Nintendo Switch 2 eShop. Not sure it was that high on Xbox both times that those came out. Not really, to be honest. But with Switch 2, it was up there. And anytime they have a sale, it's going to be back up there. It's kind of went in and out when it comes to the Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and Remake games. So they put them on sale, more people are going to go pick them up. Okay, The Adventures of Elliot, the Millennium Tales. This is a game that's kind of tailor-made and kind of like, okay, you know Nintendo fans are going to buy this. This was marketed to specifically Nintendo fans and Legend of Zelda fans, Secret of Mana fans, and that has a high association with Nintendo and with the classics and stuff like that, Super Nintendo and all of that. So, to me at least, this game, based off of what we know, little data, they haven't given us splits, but I would not be surprised considering where it was on the eShop and how Adventures of Elliot was not necessarily high ranking on Xbox or on Steam or on PlayStation too much. Switch 2 was the place where people were playing this game and buying this game. And that was one of the games that was noted that sold good and helped boost sales quite a bit. Now, we also have increased catalog sales, so older games. This was highlighted by stuff like Final Fantasy titles that came out on Switch 2, like Final Fantasy X/10-2, older games, Dragon Quest 1, 2, HD 2D Remake, Dragon Quest 3. All of these titles are out on Switch 2 and doing great when it comes to that. And if you look at what's happening now, what has this caused? Well, it's caused a shift. So you're talking about, okay, sales are sales, games are great, but what has it actually caused? Well, if you look at it now, Kingdom Hearts 4, a game that's synonymous with PlayStation and not with Nintendo as much. Yes, Nintendo has gotten some Kingdom Hearts stuff, some exclusive games, like with the handheld titles at the time of release, not its multi-platform. But yeah, Dream Drop Distance and some stuff. Yes, it's gotten some stuff over the years. GBA, Chain of Memories and all that. That is true. But when it comes to the big, numbered, mainline Kingdom Hearts games, that's more synonymous with PlayStation. That's more synonymous with multi-platform. And guess who gets the re-reveal gameplay for Kingdom Hearts 4 at a Nintendo Direct? Nintendo does, with the Switch 2. That's how much confidence they have in the platform. In the past, that would have been easily the PlayStation Direct. That would have been at the State of Play or a PlayStation Showcase. That would have not been at a Nintendo Direct. There's no way. And now with the Switch 2, because of the enhanced specs, because of the domination that we saw in Japan, because of what's happening, Nintendo now gets that reveal or that re-reveal for gameplay for Kingdom Hearts 4, which caught everybody off guard. Or even a game like Final Fantasy Resonance. This is the type of title, Final Fantasy, remember, this is more of a first big HD 2D game. And yes, there is a link between HD 2D and Nintendo because of the originator, Octopath Traveler, but still getting a Final Fantasy new game reveal at a Nintendo Direct is huge. And the response was even bigger. It was one of the more popular announcements of the June 2026 Nintendo Direct. So that, to me, Square Enix is looking at all the numbers, they're looking at the trailer numbers, they're looking at the views, and they're seeing that and they're saying, okay, there's confidence behind that. We don't have to go with Sony in order for a Final Fantasy game or a Kingdom Hearts game. We can go with Nintendo too, and people are going to tune in and support. Now, in HD 2D games, we know about that. That's had a long history, so that's something that's going to continue when it comes to HD 2D. Square Enix realized where the big audience is. Nintendo Directs sync with their types of games, and the sales results are backing that up. There's no more just saying, oh, okay, let's get that on there because we want to see it. Now we actually have, okay, we put it out on here, okay, here are the results. And that's the thing that's driving a lot of this momentum and what they're doing. Now, I want to make sure that I'm clear with this, that I don't love everything that Square Enix is doing when it comes to Switch 2. We can get more upgrade paths, for example, and we can get more save file transfers and a little bit better discounts at launch when it comes to older games. But I'd rather have them put the game out on there and wait for the sale, or for people that have never played on Switch 1, be able for them to play it, than to not have it at all. And that was essentially the thing with Switch 1. It was just like, okay, well, yeah, we'll get something sometimes, but there wasn't a priority. There wasn't an urgency like you're seeing with the Nintendo Switch 2. And there's an urgency to get a lot of these games over, and that's great. Final Fantasy XIV launching on the Nintendo Switch 2. That's huge. That is big. It was up in the top eShop charts when it comes to bestsellers. So when you start getting stuff like the major franchises, Final Fantasy, Kingdom Hearts, the big games, and I'm pretty sure Dragon Quest, the new one, they had to retool that. That game apparently was in shambles and they actually had to retool it. I'm almost positive that is going to probably be re-revealed at a Nintendo Direct as well. All of this kind of accumulates into what's going to happen for Nintendo Switch 2 in the future, and how Square Enix is probably going to be fine-tuning and tweaking their games to make sure Switch 2 can be on there. We saw that with Rebirth. They completely tuned and rebuilt things. We're going to see that with Final Fantasy VII Revelation, where yes, it's not going to be as, I would say, in-depth and as detailed as maybe the PS5 Pro version, obviously, but you're still going to get a solid experience for a hybrid system, and that's what needs to be done. Give people the choice. That's where Square Enix didn't do in the past. They didn't want to give people choices. They felt that they can just rock with one with Sony and be fine, and it caught up with them in a very bad way. But they are making amends at this point, and we're seeing that with their top franchises. This means we're going to be getting their top franchises on the Nintendo Switch 2 moving forward, and that's a great thing, and that's why it's important when it comes to the sales and what's been happening. Now, the exclusives that Square Enix banked on for the PS5 generation, they didn't pan out. It did not work, and that led a couple years ago to the restructure of their business plan, which I've covered multiple times. But if you didn't know, they restructured things, and they specifically mentioned multi-platform development with PC and Xbox, but also Nintendo. That was huge on there. They said, we're going to do that. People were skeptical. because they didn't really include Nintendo when it comes to their AAA plans for like the last decade plus. Nintendo was not included when it comes to Final Fantasy or Kingdom Hearts or anything. It was either like an afterthought or, okay, when we get to it, we'll take care of it. And usually there was no getting to it. It was just side stuff or older games. So people were skeptical, but we see now they were serious. They were dead serious with it. But if you look at those games like Forspoken, Final Fantasy 16, Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth, when all those originally launched, they didn't get the sales they wanted. They didn't get the review scores with all of them that they wanted. Forspoken, really, with that one, it kind of flopped. But Final Fantasy 16 and Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth got fantastic review scores, and they didn't light the world on fire. You had a sizable install base with the PlayStation 5, and what you saw, and I think what Square Enix saw, is that a large chunk of their audience checked out when it comes to these type of games, and a large chunk of their audience, or what they banked on sales for Japanese made games, are not on PlayStation 5. It is turned more into a ball and gun system than a JRPG real core gaming system. And I don't mean that as a knock to the PlayStation brand, but if you look at the top sellers and you look at what people are buying, it's ball and gun games. It's going to be all of the free to play stuff. It's going to be stuff like Fortnite and Roblox. These games generate so much for them, and the microtransactions and all of that. It's going to be NBA 2K, it's going to be Madden, it's going to be FC, it's going to be Call of Duty. It's going to be those type of games. So the people that like the fantasy games and the RPGs and stuff like that are now more shifted over to other platforms like the Nintendo Switch 1 and the Nintendo Switch 2. So Square Enix saw that, because when they released all of these, those sales were not there, despite having an install base at the time to really sell to. So Square Enix knew that they had to change after that. Now, all of these games on record sold less than Fire Emblem Three Houses. Think about that. Final Fantasy selling around or less than Fire Emblem. That doesn't happen. At least that didn't happen in the past. Final Fantasy has always smoked Fire Emblem in sales, but now it's actually somewhat comparable. I don't think they were happy with that at all, when it comes to anything, considering Final Fantasy used to sell like 10 million units plus, or well over 5 million units. And I think that the Japanese market, that's one thing that I mentioned before, but it's drastically changed with the arrival of the Switch 1 and the Switch 2 when it comes to the hybrid home console type of thing. Before, you had Nintendo portables, but those really needed to have games built really different for what Square Enix was doing. They had to specify, okay, we're making this handheld game for this handheld system, and it's going to be completely different. Now with Switch 1 and Switch 2, and really more Switch 2, it's like, wait a minute, we can make the same type of game, or we can make a game that's kind of built for it because of what it can do, and then we can port it over to everything. So I think that's the big difference here, and what Square Enix is seeing with the Switch 2, and really what they saw with the Switch 1. I've said this before, I'll say it again, Square Enix made a massive mistake not seeing the potential of the Nintendo Switch 1, and they really only made a small handful of games that was built with that system in mind. Octopath Traveler, Triangle Strategy, those type of titles, HD 2D, but no original Final Fantasy games, no real big AAA games built for the Switch 1. That was a huge mistake. They lost a ton of money in the Switch 1 generation, in my opinion. That's why they decided to come out strong out of the gate when it comes to the Nintendo Switch 2. They were adamant that they could not do the same thing when it comes to the Switch 1 with the Nintendo Switch 2, because they lost out on so much. And they've been front and center. They've been porting over stuff. They've been making sure Switch 2 is included in the AAA titles and smaller games, and it's great to see. And I hope that it continues. And I think that it will absolutely continue based off of what Square Enix is saying here, now that we can put the ideas and what they're doing and the releases and the sales, and we can kind of all put them together with the results. This is what they needed to do. They needed to make sure that they got Nintendo Switch 2 on board. And I think that's part of the reason why you look at what's happening in Japan, why people, so many people at this point, and the rising costs of everything, are saying, okay, I can pick Switch 2 now as my main system, which I made a video on that the other day. Make sure you check out that video if you haven't seen that video, where I talk about how Switch 2 can be a main system for a lot of people. Now, it can still be a great, if not the best, secondary system. I'm pretty sure there's going to be tens of millions of people throughout the generation that pick up Switch 2 to be the secondary system. But with a company like Square Enix on board, with the type of games that they make, they have some of the best games in the industry, some of the best franchises with Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest and Kingdom Hearts. With those type of games, some people, that's what they play. That's their favorite. If you get that alongside Nintendo's best and a few other titles here and there, that can turn into a main system scenario and situation for a lot of people. Not everybody, obviously not the ball and gun type of gamers with everything, but for a lot of people, that can be like, okay, Switch 2 can be my main system because it's going to have Final Fantasy right there day and date. It's going to have Kingdom Hearts day and date. It's going to have Dragon Quest. It's going to have a lot of these games. And I'm looking at what the other companies are offering, and it's not just quite there for everything. So I think that's what all of this means. Now, obviously, doesn't mean everybody's going to think this way. We're talking about just Square Enix here. Obviously, Western companies are going to think very differently. But once again, not everybody's going to get everything in all of the favorable situations. So I'm just describing how Square Enix made the right idea and had the right deal here to really get back on top. And that's what's happening here. I can't wait to see what happens in the future and what other games they decide to make because of this boom here with Switch 2. So what are your thoughts on everything that we talked about here? Let me know in the comment section below. All right, peeps, that wraps it up for this video here. Thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate it. Please make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you're someone new, click that notification bell, and check out my other Nintendo Switch 2 RPG content and more right here on screen. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you for the next one. Peace.